Hello YouTube, this is Occult Investigations here, bringing you chapter 1 of our folklore reading. Today I'm going to bring you a story called A Wellspring of the Universe. Once upon a time, along Cornwall's stern south coast, where the land knots up into granite fists and finally surrenders to the battering waves of the sea, generations of fishermen once combed the shores for shipwrecked treasures. These wreckers profited by the gales that howled up from the English Channel, dashing wooden trading vessels to splinters on the Cornish rocks. For days after a storm, fragments of the ships and the goods they carried, barrels of rum and salted beef, bales of flax, brass fittings on pieces of wreckage washed up with the tides. The villagers who found these fruits of tragedy regarded them as gifts from the sea, like the catches of pilchard and mackerel that swelled their nets on good days. It seemed that, for every life the water took, it gave a living to another. But to one Cornishman, the sea gave much, much more. A man of middle years named Ludi, he lived quietly with his wife and dog in a squat stone cottage near the village of Curry on Lizard Point. With his children grown and gone now, wrecking was his special pleasure of his idle hours. A thick ship's rudder made his mantelpiece, and on it sat a fine brass clock. In the corner, a gilded figurehead stared out over the earth-floored room with blank wooden eyes. Ludi's life changed forever on a hazy spring afternoon. On a day when bluish mists rose off the sea and pink-flowered thrift ran riot over the walls of his village. In the company of his dog, he wandered among the rocks below his house to see what he might find. After a while, he heard a faint cry, then another, so weak that it was barely audible above the mumble of the waves. He followed the sound, which led him across a clutter of boulders that ringed a small depression in the shore. At high tide, the surf surged freely in and out, but when the water was at low tide, the place became a tidal pool. Isolated from the great mother sea by a stretch of sand and green muddled rocks. Was it land then, or was it sea? It was neither, and both an in-between place, its boundaries shifting with every mood of the noon. In such mutable, magical spots, strange spirits might enter the mortal world, as one had done this day. Ludi peered down into the circle of rocks. His gaze was met by sea-green eyes from another age and another realm. They were frightened eyes, set in a sweet, pale face half hidden by red and gold hair. This being was clearly female from head to waist, but at the hips her body faded into a long, smooth shape, a shimmering iridescence beneath the surface of the pool. Ludi stood gaping, still as a tree. He had found a mermaid. "Help me," she whimpered. "Help me to the water." She thrashed in the shallow pool. Ludi advanced cautiously down the rocks, wading through a flurry of tiny fish and crabs to get to her side. "I can give you powers, if only you will get me to the sea," she said, raising her arms with the gesture of a trustful child. Ludi bent and lifted her from the water. The sea maiden was light as a cloud. She wrapped her arms around his neck and bore up over the lip of the rock that rimmed the pool, and picked his way down to the furrowed stretch of sand. From among the rocks behind him trotted his dog, whining nervously. At the water's edge, he halted. The mermaid looked up into his face and made a nestling movement in his arms. "Tell me your heart's desire," she murmured, "and you shall have it, whatever it may be." Ludi looked out to the sea for a moment. Then he said, I want the power to break evil spells. For you see, witchcraft was an age-old practice in his remote sea-ringed land. A disgruntled Cornish villager could bring misfortune on a neighbor merely by ill-wishing. The man who could reverse such spells would be sought after indeed. The sea maiden smiled and ran a delicate finger along his face. "It is done," she said. "And what other boon?" Ludi was in the water now, breakers foaming about his knees. "I want the magic to cast healing spells." "Done," she said. "And another?" I want these powers for my sons, and for their sons, and for their sons after, so that my family's name will be honored for all time." "You have it," said the mermaid. "For your kindness, you shall hold all these gifts." As a pledge, she drew from her hair the ivory comb that held it, and the long tresses cascaded about her shoulders and her creamy breast. She pressed the comb into his hand, standing in the sea. Ludi felt the dizzying pull of the tide. His feet sank deeper into the sand with every wave that broke about him, and the shore's edge. His dog set up a howl. The mermaid laughed, tightened her hold around his neck. Droplets of water sparkled on her lashes. Now the two of them were in her element. She pulled his head down so that her mouth was at his ear. "Stay with me," she whispered. "What pleasures have you left on the shore?" Ludi choked and struggled. The frail arms were surprisingly strong, and his feet slipped on the seafloor. The dog was pulling at his trouser legs, stumbling in the shallow surf. He let go of the mermaid instinctively. He drew out his pocket knife. At the sight of it, the sea maiden gave a powerful kick of her tail, arching out of reach. Like many creatures of other worlds, she was repelled by iron. "Farewell," she sang then. "For 9 years I will bide, then we shall meet again." She gave a leap that took her into the deep water, and the last Ludi saw of her was the streaming flame-like hair vanishing into the green sea. Urged by his dog, he struggled to the shore and climbed to the cottage, with the comb clutched in one hand and the knife in the other. His wife stood watching him from the door. "What's this now?" she said. "Wet to the skin and naught but a bit of bone to show for an afternoon's wrecking?" "It's a comb," Ludi said quietly. "A comb it is," replied his wife. "It's a row of teeth on a shark jaw." Ludi looked at it and discovered that this was true. "Yet I'll keep it," he said, and walked past her into the cottage. He carefully hung his prize on a beam, amid the clutter of fish nets and wooden buoys and drying frames suspended there. Then he spread his wet clothes before the fire to dry, and ate in silence the food his wife set before him. After supper, the woman turned her stolid profile to him and bent to her sewing. Ludi was early to bed, staring up at the sea maiden's strange token until the sea outside sent him to sleep with its ceaseless song. It was on a day soon after, as Ludi walked through the village, that the mermaid's promise was fulfilled. In a wind-stunted tangle of hawthorn trees, he saw a farmer kneeling beside a dead cow. This was but one of many. The man said, tight-lipped, his herd was cursed, but who had done it, he did not know. The fisherman knelt down. "A witch had done this," he said. "Bleed the next cow that falls ill and catch the blood on a pile of straw. When it dries, set fire to the straw, and mark well the first person who passes through the smoke. That is your ill-wisher. Then deal with the witch how you will." He was silent for a moment, listening with surprise to his own words. "Aye," said the farmer, with no further comment. The odd prescription brought swift results. Word of Ludi's cleverness passed quickly about the village of Curry. There was a child Ludi saved next. A man came asking for him late one night, and with lantern in hand, led him to a poor, cramped cottage down the bay. The mother looked up from the pallet where the young one lay, racked with fever. The tide's turning is close at hand, she said anxiously. The belief was strong that death came only on the low tide. If the sick one could be held fast through the turning until the flood tide set in, there would be another 6 hours of grace. Ludi carried the child outside, down a rocky path to a grove where a sapling stood in the shadow of the great parent tree. It was an ash, the tree Englishmen held sacred, for reasons long forgotten. Into its branches Ludi gently thrust the child, and the moment that marked the slack between the ebb and the flood of the sea, the magics of the ages touched the sapling. The child's fever broke. By autumn, when the pilchards were running, Ludi had no time left for fishing. His reputation as a healer, so named because he could expel evil spirits and sickness, had spread far beyond Curry and Lizard Points. The poor folk came to Ludi in times of trouble, bearing jugs of fish oil or lengths of stout rope if they could afford no more. It seemed there was nothing he did not know. He kept a bit of Haman's rope for the curing of his scrofula, and sold written charms to wear around the neck for warding off ill-wishers. He knew the secret recipes for medicines made from charred mice and scabious roots. The devil's bit so prized for its healing powers. One by one, the sons of Ludi tied up their boats and joined them. They, too, understood the power of the angelica leaves and elder blossoms to cure a cold, and groundsel to stop the fevers and pains. The art of healing came to them in the same mysterious way, as if through the water they bathed in and the air they breathed. Ludi kept to himself the source of the gift, and the comb he held in covenant through the winters of endless misty rain and summers bright with yellow shine. After a few years, he moved to a larger dwelling in the village, a house that boasted an upper story with many rooms to please his fretful wife, but he grew more withdrawn with the years and often returned to the old stone cottage at low tide to sit alone by the tidal pool. One day, abruptly, he took his herring nets and headed towards the sea. "Going to fish," was all he said. This was no day for fishing. In the harbor of the village, angry waves lapped across the boats. Along the shore, the sky was thick with clouds and scudded before threatening winds. Ludi's sons exchanged glances, and the youngest followed the old man to see that no harm would befall him. In the end, though, the son was helpless against the force that moved his father. Ludi had pushed a small skiff into the water. It bobbed and pitched in the chop, but he made no move to guide it. Pale arms and a bright red head flashed around the little vessel. The mermaid was sporting in the waves, still young and fair, although the mortal man's hair was thin and streaked with gray. While the sun watched from shore, the sea maiden beckons. Ludi rose to his feet, lurching in the swells. "My hour has come," he shouted at his son, and the father plunged into the water and was gone. Later, the youth would report that the sea had simply swallowed his father alive, and in a sense it did. For with that plunge, the old man had crossed into a boundary of another world, a world as old and fathomless as time itself. The mermaid had him now, drawing him down and down through corridors of hazy green to her sea cave nestled far below the Cornish shore. Whether he never regretted leaving the life of men and boats, whether the mermaid's dwelling was humble or fine, whether she kept him only or had others as well, no one will ever know. Ludi was never seen again on Earth. The mermaid's magic endured through his kin for generations. The Ludis of Curry were renowned for their powers against sickness and witchcraft, but she took her payment all the same. It was said that every 9 years, as regularly as the tides, one of his descendants were lost at sea.